Hello, and welcome to what I hope will be a relatively short video talking about a what-if scenario around the Battle of Narvik on the 8th-9th of April 1940. So what I'm really talking about here is what if one little tiny change happened. So way up in northern Norway, on the night of the 8th-9th of April 1940, a British admiral made a decision that he later came to regret. This what if is about that decision, and the admiral is Vice Admiral William Whitworth. He's currently aboard HMS Renown, and he's accompanied by 5 fully armed destroyers and 4 mine layer destroyers that have had to land their guns, or 2 of their 4 guns and all of their torpedoes, to have taken on board 40 to 60 naval mines, which they have laid on the morning of the 8th, before then being retasked to assist in hunting for German forces. Of course, the difficulty there is that they are not hugely well armed, but still. So, essentially, the situation facing our good admiral is, does he take the red pill or the blue pill? A or B? So option A is to wait outside the Vestfjord, kind of where he's nearish to where he's laid the mines, and wait for the bad weather to pass. And it really is bad weather, proper bad weather. I'll explain in a bit. And assume that the German forces are going to heave to and not going to try and attempt to do anything crazy like proceed at high speed through this bad weather. Option B is to proceed up the Vestfjord to Narvik and aim to get there maybe ahead of the German forces, and maybe find some more sheltered waters for his ships. So how bad is the weather really? What are we talking about here? It's bad. Visibility is described as poor, and bear in mind, we're going to be talking about 20 warships here. One of them has radar, 1 out of 20. And radar is not great in coastal areas at this point necessarily, because it gets all the returns from the coastline. So not sure how useful it will actually end up being anyway. So weather is bad, visibility is poor, darkness is coming. The shore at this point is not your friend. The shore is something that you will get wrecked on. So actually the safe option is to move out to sea. Stand out to sea is the way it's termed. Ride out the storm and then come back. And assume, as I say, assume that the Germans are sane and good sailors, which you have no particular reason to suppose they aren't. So now the winds are a force 10, which I believe is lots, and they're coming from the northwest, which probably means it's cold, because I think that means it's kind of coming from Iceland, Greenland, the Arctic. And just to give an idea, so at 10 o'clock that evening, the cruiser HMS Birmingham, so that's a good 10,000 ton town class cruiser, if you so similar-ish to HMS Belfast, not a small ship, not a diddy one, has been forced to heave to because you just can't make any progress. And at about the same sort of time as this, the Admiral on board Renown is told by his captain of destroyers, so the person who's in charge of all the destroyers, says that the destroyer is just unmanageable in the seaway. They can't hold formation. They can't do anything except go to self-protection mode and just try to avoid getting sunk, basically. They won't get sunk in this sort of thing. They will survive. They'll be fine. They just need to concentrate on that rather than doing anything else at the moment. So decision to be made at about 7:15. You may be able to guess from the way that the font has shrunk that this is going to be a slightly busier slide. So, option A. This is the real history. The Germans had actually already passed Whitworth, Admiral Whitworth, with renown and his force during some of the bad visibility during the afternoon. So they were actually ahead of him, which he didn't think they could do. What does happen, though, is nice and early in the morning, on the 9th of April, Renown encounters Scharnhorst and Gneisenau and gets to exchange heavy caliber shell fire with them for nearly 3 hours, landing a couple of hits, taking a couple of hits, but without any significant damage. I think possibly some midshipmen's baggage might have been damaged. That's about it. And frankly, after that encounter, Scharnhorst and Gneisenau turn away into the Arctic Ocean further up north, and they're not really seen or heard of for really quite some time during the invasion campaign. They don't really play any other part after this, so it's not bad. But the German destroyers land at Narvik, only opposed by the local Norwegian forces, and quickly take the town. There is a considerable debate as to whether the commander of the garrison at Narvik was a traitor, a follower of Quisling, or whether he was just incompetent and rubbish at his job. Don't know, but yeah, he would later go on to be arrested and, if there's any justice in the world, shot, but I'm not sure. I didn't bother looking. He sounds like he was a bit of a Nazi. Yeah, not interested. So, what about option B? Timings are approximate. This is my kind of what if, so, go with it. Renown and her friends are about 240 kilometres from Narvik, so it's 130 nautical miles. Given that it's bad weather, they don't think that the Germans are ahead of them. I reckon they'll arrive about 5-ish. I'm making stuff up. I'm trying to work out what's going to be sensible and things. I don't know. Now, the German forces had passed them, and by 2 o'clock in the morning, they were only about 10 nautical miles from Narvik, and they were waiting for 0415, which might also be recorded as 0515 because the time recordings on the different by the different forces gets very confusing during the comparing records, because often the Germans would be using German time and the British would be using British time, and there'd be at least an hour's difference with these, which can make life a little bit challenging when you're trying to work out and remain consistent. But basically, the Germans have got there ahead of them. They have this Wesersight. So this is so the German invasion is Operation Weserübung. I think I've said that right. I don't know. And so the day of the invasion is Wesertag, which is, kind of their equivalent of D-Day. And the time when they're going to go is Wesersight. And I will spare you having to watch me try and work out what 4:15 in the morning is in German. Yeah, I won't do that to you all. I studied German for 2 years. You wouldn't know unless I told you. So what's happening is at about 4:15, some German patrol boat, the German destroyers encounter some Norwegian patrol boats, but one of them, called Kelt. I'm also going to have to apologise for all of my catastrophically awful Norwegian pronunciation here. One of them gets off a warning message to the ships and the garrisons further in, to Narvik. Whether they do anything with it or not is... So, taking this on further. I don't think that my changed scenario is going to see any big difference between what happened in reality and what happens in my scenario. I just don't think Renown and her friends are going to get there in time. So sadly, the Norwegian coastal defence ships, Eidsvold and Norge, will both be sunk. So Eidsvold confronted one of the German destroyers, Z-21, the Wilhelm Heidkamp, and there was an attempt at kind of negotiation and parley. The Germans tried to say, we're here to be friends, but you'll have to kind of disarm. And the Norwegians went, not sure about that. Let me call my boss. And the Germans went, no, we're not going to let you. But it turned out the Norwegians already had called their bosses because they'd already got the message from the Celt. So then Eidsvold started charging the Wilhelm Heidkamp, and at the range of about 300 meters, unfortunately failing to land a hit because they were moving and the crews weren't necessarily hugely brilliantly trained and experienced in using their equipment, was struck by 2 torpedoes and sank very quickly with heavy loss of life. I believe might have hit a magazine and just blew up most of the ship. And then they're going into freezing cold water, which is not good for your health for prolonged periods. So then the Norge, alerted to this, spots the Z-11, the Bernd von Arnim, and started shooting at about 4:45. Didn't land any hits. Similar problems. Now, the Germans here were quite brave, bold, bearing in mind that all of these German destroyers are carrying, each of them is carrying 200 soldiers, and their job is to land the soldiers. So they've basically just been used as fast transports to get the invasion force there. So Z-11 comes into Narvik harbour, lands, or doesn't, docks, gets the soldiers off, or starts getting the soldiers off, and then starts shooting back at Norge using the 5-ish inch guns. She's got, I think they are 127mm 5-inch guns, and also firing torpedoes. Now they launch 2 torpedoes, miss. They launch 2 more torpedoes, miss. They launch 2 more torpedoes, 1 hits. And Norge apparently sinks within something like a minute of being hit. And this is by now only just gone 5 o'clock. Again, heavy loss of life, not quite as heavy as Eidsvold. Eidsvold had only a handful of survivors. Norge, a bit under half the crew survived. I can't see Renown getting there in time. Yeah, it's kind of sucks. So the brief victory. We're going to be concentrating here to start off with on the where's my finger? This bit of the thing. So looking around Narvik, the Narvik side, you've got 10 German destroyers. I think at this point 8 of them are kind of tied up, landed, whatever you want to call it, to land their troops. So a bunch of them are up here. So that's a major Norwegian base. So you've got 3 landing their troops there. You've got a couple more which are landing troops in places which the Germans thought would probably be defended, kind of coastal fortifications. They actually weren't, it turned out, but that's what the Germans thought, so they landed troops there to try and stop them from shooting at them. You've got, I reckon, probably 3. It's a little bit hard to piece together when I'm just going through this quickly. 3 of them landing at Narvik. Z-17 has been left out deliberately. She's kind of keeping an eye on things. And then last of all, Z-12 has suffered engine trouble and is running late. So you've got all of them. Then I'll just see if I can get rid of that. Oh, yay. Sorry, bear with me. Yeah. So then, also somewhere in and around Narvik, you have 10 neutral merchant ships. I think something like 4 are Norwegian, 5 are Swedish, 1's Dutch, 5 British flag merchant ships, and you've got 10 German flag merchant ships there. Now there's also an 11th German flagged ship here called the Jan Velem. Now she's actually a military auxiliary, a naval auxiliary, replenishment oiler and maintenance ship, and she's basically there as part of the plan to refuel the German destroyers. So she arrived a few days before, going, "Oh no, we're here to look after some fishing boats and things, and we're just passing through." And the idea is that she's there to refuel the German destroyers because the Germans don't really believe in giving their destroyers any sort of range or, fuel tanks, and so they're all pretty much out of fuel. There are actually supposed to be 2 other oilers coming along to help the Germans. They end up getting sunk so don't end up actually playing a part in any of this. Never mind. And then we've got the British forces, who I've done in blue. So they are around here. Now, what you can hopefully see is there's a bigger one here. That would be Renown. She's got 5 proper destroyers with her, and I'm calling them proper destroyers because they're actually armed as destroyers. And so they're going to form a fighting wedge because they'll have heard the gunfire, they'll have heard the radio calls, all of that sort of thing. And then you've also got the forces which are equipped as mine layers. I would have them coming up behind. So they've dropped their mines off, but they've only got half their gun armament. So they're not. You don't really want to have them engaging too much stuff because the German destroyers have got 5-inch guns and carry 8 21-inch or so torpedoes. These are carrying now only 2 4.7-inch guns, and they'll probably have the fairly useless 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine guns, and that's about it. They're better than nothing, and there's no point sending them back, and the weather's been terrible, so you're better off coming up the fjord with everyone. But they're not necessarily going to play a huge part in the fighting. But looking at this fighting, looking at these kind of forces, I mean, I would say that what will probably happen is that you'll get Z-12 erased, Z-17 erased, and then I would anticipate the other German ships will have started to try and undock and get engaged, and I think they will all get deleted and sunk because, yeah, battle cruiser. Yeah. And a load of destroyers coordinating whilst the Germans have split themselves up into penny packets. Yeah. Oh well. So, this is the crucial thing. The outcome is basically decided because the British brought a capital ship to a destroyer fight. You know? So, it's going to be a bloodbath. German destroyers are not expecting a British force to arrive so soon. They're not expecting things to go like this at all. British have a number of advantages. Surprise, fear, and a fanatical devotion to rum. No, wait, that's the Monty Python Spanish Inquisition. Never mind. Their forces are concentrated, so although they've got a smaller force in terms of probably effective warships, they're all together and they've got the capital ship. Renown does have radar. I don't know how much use it'll be. And then, capital ship. Can't say this often enough. Don't care what World of Warships says about you over-penetrating and things. You are going to blow the snot out of them. It is not going to be fun to be a German destroyer at this point. You're in really tight waters. Okay, if it was the open ocean and you could be zooming around and doing lots of fun things and launching torpedoes and zip, zap, zoom, yeah, you stand a chance in a destroyer. That's why you have your own destroyers as an escort, as a capital ship. That's not what we've got here. What we've got here, to remind you, is the German force are mostly tied up. They are nearly out of fuel, and they're spread out. They just don't stand a chance. So, expanding a bit on what's happened, because I think it's interesting, and for once, I'm going to move on from just the battle like that because, yeah. So, I don't think Narvik's going to be captured and held by the Germans in the face of this kind of opposition this quickly. I think it will be enough to give the Norwegian garrison force, time to put up a bit more of an effective resistance, which they were hampered in doing by all kinds of factors. Nothing dramatic. I mean, as I say, it's not quite clear whether the guy commanding the garrison was incompetent or a traitor or both. But the Norwegians were caught relatively unprepared, and this probably gives them time. And then what I would be doing is I would be landing shore parties of heavily armed and excited to have some fun destroyer crews from the 4 mine layer crew destroyers, and Renown will probably have reasonable number of Marines on board and can probably donate some sailors without affecting combat stuff too much. And then with a bit of naval gunfire support as well. Yeah, remember those 50 cal machine guns I said were rubbish? I now want you to picture those if you could actually dismount maybe 1 or 2 of the barrels and start using them as heavy machine guns. And I want you to imagine what the German mountain troops, who are, really good troops, being landed. These are not bad soldiers. German soldiers are good soldiers. But, yeah, they're going to struggle with that. So that's quite fun. You've got Gneisenau and Scharnhorst loose in the North Sea, but already by this point, you've got Repulse, another battle cruiser, so 15-inch guns, which the Germans are not going to want to tangle with. Penelope, a small but very feisty 6-inch cruiser. Bedouin, Eskimo, Punjabi, so those would be tribal class destroyers, so scary. Kimberley, a K-class destroyer, so these are some of the kind of standard, or I just think of them as letter class, but the K class are post tribals. So tribals you get up A to I, then you get the tribals, then you get J, K, and then you get war. So Kimberley is pretty good as well. Learned a lot of the lessons they made there from the building of the tribals, although not how to keep the costs down from memory. Then you've also got, moving up, Birmingham, a good 6-inch cruiser, and a couple more destroyers, Hostile and Fearless, are all heading up, and of course your forces from Narvik are also going to be now heading back out. So it's going to be different, and obviously there's a good chance Scharnhorst and Gneisenau are going to come up against a ship that is not as able to outmatch them as the Renown was really able to do, but they didn't really know that. Anyway, so that's my scenario and my what if. I'm quite pleased with it. I tried to keep it short. I'm going to try and stick to under 30 minutes, although who knows if I'll manage. I was just going to say the sources I used were Wikipedia-ish. And then there's navalhistory.net. And another good source I found was a sort of looking around. There's the records of the so on navalhistory.net they've got the Admiralty War Diaries for the battle cruiser squadron. So that's got the report written by the Admiral Whitworth himself, where he says, I made a mistake and I should have acted differently. So they've got all of those sorts of details. And another useful source I found was I'm just finding it in my notebook. There's a website called rnsubmuseumfriends.org.uk, which is rnsubmusfriends.org.uk, and they have a book by an Admiral Heslett covering all of the focusing on submarine operations, which actually had a lot of really good details about the whole Norwegian campaign and things. So I would recommend that. And last of all, my usual recommendations of, if you don't already do it, Alex Clark, Naval History Live, Drachinifel, Military History Visualized, his other one, Military History Not Visualized, and Military Aviation History. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, if you've watched this far, and join me when I've finally got enough stuff together to work out what I think is going to happen when if the Royal Navy had not sent away all their forces and had actually been a bit better prepared for everything that was going to happen in the Norway campaign. Still working on that. Taken quite a lot of thinking, but in doing that thinking, I found this other scenario to look at, and so I thought I'd try and create something for you all. Ta-da!